Some of you may have seen the video that's playing during this overdub, in which a call was made for the local town council here in New Milford to demand a ceasefire in the ongoing Israel-Gaza war. Link is in this video's description, and as promised, this is my response. As a matter of good form, I'm going to limit my commentary to the length of the original video. I'll also put the text of the proposed resolution in this video's description for those that missed out. In short, this has no business at a local town council meeting here in New Milford, Connecticut, and in a country that's something like 5,000 miles from the nearest belligerent. As I've said before, these meetings serve one and only one purpose, which is to conduct the business of the town council. There is a clear limit of scope when it comes to that business, which is the borders of this town. It is a waste of the taxpayers' time who want to keep apprised of the businesses of the duly elected representatives of the legislative body, comprised of their neighbors, to include on the proverbial docket every possible political issue from here to frigging Mars. And Robert's rules explicitly call for concision, which is why calling the question exists. There is no way any honest human being could consider adopting a resolution to demand a ceasefire in an ongoing war roughly 6,000 miles from Town Hall in any way part of the body's business, and that's before we get into content. Which, of course, is that there already was a ceasefire on October 6th, and as their founding documents demand they do, Hamas, the legitimate and elected governing body of Gaza, violated that ceasefire with the explicit intent of specifically targeting civilians with the greatest of violence, many of whom are still being held by Hamas as hostages. Israel formally declared war and did so for a reason. Hamas demonstrated the wholesale bad faith of the original agreement in the most violent possible of terms. There is no version of any agreement with Hamas that Israel could make that would be made based on Hamas's good faith other than their total and unconditional surrender, as the U.S. rightfully demanded of the Japanese, whose attack on Pearl Harbor launched the U.S. into a formal declaration of war against, among other Axis powers, Japan. This point is irrefutably evidenced by Hamas's continued refusal to hand over the remaining civilian hostages, much less without wildly protracted and extremely one-sided negotiations. A ceasefire would be a wildly negligent act of Israel and a total dereliction of duty toward the protection of their own citizenry, and will painfully obviously just mean a free pass for Hamas to regroup, recover, rearm, and conduct yet another terrorist attack specifically targeting civilian Jews in Israel with total impunity. The only way to deal with a totalizing and existential threat, and who is your immediate neighbor, is with a totalizing and existential response. As the Allies were right to not lay down their arms before the Axis powers after the successful storming of the beaches of Normandy, Israel is right to ignore wholesale any demands to do the same. The answer to the question of how many Gazans must die before peace can be reached is the same answer to the question of how many Germans must die before peace could be reached in World War II. If their government continues to refuse to surrender, and the citizenry continue to defend their government, all the Germans. Good on the Republicans of the town council for summarily shutting this down, and not wasting time debating whether this should be on the agenda. Let the Democrats open their mouths and insert their feet, shut your own mouths, and then vote against the motion, as they unanimously did. This could have turned into a long-winded and protracted waste of time should one of the Republicans have jumped in to call out just how awful this proposal was, and I've witnessed that exact scenario play out more times than I can count, but on this night, it didn't. When something this ridiculous comes before the council, something so ridiculous you know the majority is going to just vote it down, then just vote it down. We really don't need debate on something so obviously one-sided, and especially on something that, again, ignoring its content, simply has no place at a town council meeting here in New Milford, Connecticut. We certainly don't always get wins, but when you get them, you take them. And here, we got one.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion does not carry.